right, so we just talked about the external injuries that you observed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And as part of the autopsy that you performed on the child, did you find any internal injuries?
Yeah, we did.
What kind of internal injuries did you find?
The major internal injury that I saw was a laceration of the liver. And I'll refresh my memory here with how long it was. A 2.5 inch laceration of the liver at the attachment of the falciform ligament, which is where the liver has a right lobe and a left lobe, and there's a ligament that goes right between them. It's right next to the largest lobe of the liver. There's two lobes. Largest was on the right.
Now, I think you said it was either the main or the major injury that you located.
There were other hemorrhages in here.
Well, then let's talk about those.
Okay,
You
sure.
want there all of the internal injuries that you found?
Okay, sure. There was a hemorrhage on the scalp. When we reflect the scalp, what we do, we reflect the scalp means that we open it. In other words, we make a cut across from one side of the head to the other, and then we take the scalp and pull it forward this way and pull it forward and back. And in that, in the right and the back right, it was the back right posterior parietal, which is back in this area, there was hemorrhage in the scalp there, so that was indicate that there was some type of trauma in that area. Something caused that hemorrhage in the scalp. Also, there were there was also at the vertex. There was some hemorrhage at the vertex, which is the top of the scalp. The anterior abdominal wall muscles, in other words, your six-pack or whatever you want to call those muscles in the front, the rectus abdominis muscles, there was hemorrhage in those. So that's from some time of trauma to those muscles that would cause them to bleed. The tissue in the mesentery, what the mesentery is the fat, in your small and large bowel, kind of goes like this, fish like back and forth through your lower abdomen. And between that, what holds that together is mesentery fat. And there's a lot of blood vessels in there. Well, there was hemorrhage in these blood vessels and in the fat of the small and large bowel. And then the laceration of the liver was that was the major injury that I saw. And about 200 ml of blood, which is
When you say ml, what do you mean?
Oh, milliliters, I'm sorry. 200 milliliters of blood, which is probably the size of the amount that would hold in a cola can. There was hemorrhage in the pancreas, which is right there with the small, right next to the small valve. There was hemorrhage in the testicular cord, which is the cord that holds the testicles. So near the same area as that abrasion was. And there was some serosal hemorrhage of the intestines. Serosal surface of the intestines is just the top surface, and there was some hemorrhage in that. Also from trauma.
All right, so this is State's Exhibit 11.
Okay.
What is that?
That's this is the right lobe of the liver. The liver sits right up here under your diaphragm, or right below your diaphragm. And this falciform ligament is this thing right here. And it's right in the middle between these two lobes. Like I said, this is the right lobe of the liver is large, and it tapers and gets smaller over this side. But there was trauma to this part of the stomach that caused that to tear. The liver is a pretty solid organ, but it's still very friable, meaning you can tear it or push into it easily.
Okay.
So it doesn't take much force.
So as part of your role as a medical examiner in performing the autopsy, do you determine whether there's a method and manner of death?
We do. That's our job is to determine cause and manner.
Okay. And what information do you use in order to make that determination, provide that opinion?
Well, partly is we base it upon the coroner and law enforcement because they will tell us what circumstance would require this person to brought to us to be the autopsy. The other thing is then we take into consideration what injuries we see, and is it something that would be consistent with one, incident, or could it be consistent with several different incidents, especially with child?
So when you say incident, what do you mean?
I mean, was it just one thing? Was it just a lacerated liver, or was there other things that we can document that were? So that's our part of our job, is to determine all these different things, whether what one or which ones contributed to this person's demise.
Okay. And did you find just one thing?
The main thing was hemorrhage was the main reason. The laceration of the liver, hemorrhage, and the hemorrhage in the abdominal, the intestines, things, that all collectively contributed to that.
Okay. You said collectively.
Yeah.
But there's evidence of other injuries, right?
The injuries, the external injuries, were all ones that we would consider. We would consider those. We look for something, especially in the shop. We look to see what kind of injuries they have. In children, a lot of the injuries that we see on a child are not necessarily in this case, but when children will see where they're a toddler or something, they may have scrapes and things like that from walking into furniture or falling down or things like that. But we don't see a lacerated liver with that.
Okay. Well, when you performed the autopsy, I mean, did you find any of those bruises or scrapes on any of his extremities?
Not on the extremities. It was mostly on his mouth and his abdomen.
Okay. So what, in your opinion, was the cause of death?
It was a blood force trauma of the abdomen and the liver.
Okay. And was that laceration of the liver?
Correct.
Blunt force impact?
Correct.
Laceration of the liver? Okay. And what was the manner?
The manner of death we determined to be homicide.
Okay. So you said that you based this on kind of the information that you gathered plus the autopsy, whatever you find in the
Right.
autopsy. Is this a scenario where it could be an accident?
In this case, no.
Okay. Why do you say that?
These injuries are ones that it doesn't support an accident. If a lacerated liver is something I see like a car accident. Lacerated liver is serious. I mean, that's a major injury. And the story that we were told, or the information we were provided, didn't indicate that this child had been in any kind of situation where he would get an injury to his liver that devastating.
And you say it's a major injury, and I think you kind of put it in the context of a car accident.
That's
Are you referring kind of to the force that's needed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. How much force do you think is needed to lacerate the liver?
Well, it would take a significant amount because the liver is somewhat protected by the abdomen, so you've got to put some force onto that. And the reason I say car accident is because we do see that in car accidents. We see a lot more injuries than just that in a car accident. But this was directed, focused on that abdomen and that liver. In other words, this was to get that falling down on your belly. You're not going to get a lacerated liver. Falling out of a bunk bed, you're not going to get a lacerated liver. The only way you would get that is if you fell onto something. And it would have to be something significant that was hard, that enough that whenever you fell on it or were high enough to fall on it and hit it hard enough to push in far enough to lacerate your liver. We don't see that in kids.
And is it fair to say that if you did fall off a bunk bed and land on a traffic cone, you would see one impact?
Well, yeah, if we're talking about like one of those plastic cones or something like that, and that would have to, in my mind, that plastic cone would maybe not even, but that type of shape, it gives you a focus. A focus point is the top of that cone. If you're falling from a height and you hit that, possibly went in, deep enough through the bowel and hit the liver and lacerated. But it just falling from the bunk bed or something like that, I wouldn't expect to see a lacerated liver.
Could this potentially have been caused by CPR?
It's unlikely. The reason I say that is because the CPR that from what I understand, that was performed was done at the pediatrician's office. And a pediatrician would know not to push on the abdomen to do CPR.
So when you're doing CPR,
you push on the chest over the line of the sternum.
Okay. So let me ask you this. So it took a while for this report to be generated, right? Your autopsy report.
It takes a little while, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think this one probably took longer than normal.
Well, we had to wait for toxicology results, and we had to
Okay.
wait for histology results,
Okay.
which is looking at tissue under the microscope.
Okay. And so, I think, were you able to determine the time of death?
No.
Or, excuse me, let me rephrase that. A time for when the injury occurred.
I can't give you, I mean, it wasn't days, it was probably hours.
Well, and that's what I'm referring to. So, do you recall a number of months later that there was a meeting with some people where you guys went over it and
Well,
discussed
I
it?
went over with the chief there.
With the chief?
The chief medical examiner, his name is Jonathan Eisenstadt.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at that point, was there a time frame for the injury?
I would have to look back, I'm not sure, Jonathan's very good at what he does, but I don't remember.
No, that's okay.
He gave us
That's
the
okay.
time.
But you just recall that there was
Oh,
another
yeah,
medical
there's-
examiner
right,
who
this
was
was
kind of
important.
involved.
Right,
in
this was an important
investigation.
case to look at very carefully, so I included the chief medical examiner, and I don't remember if there's anybody else, but we went over the case. And I'm sure if he came up with a timeline, I just don't remember it.
Okay. All right, I don't have anything further at this time.